So, can you give me an idea of what your response to what I'm saying is? Is it of interest to you? Do you want me to twist it? Is there something that I'm saying that you may not be interested in, or something that I didn't say you are interested in terms of the spectrum of the movements?
Movements are very interesting, and if you've experienced the different movements, it'll be very
Yes, that's true. I've experienced them personally.
Very interesting.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, by the way, I have to tell you. Wait. I have to tell you that I'm very seriously hearing impaired. I'm almost deaf. When I became a rabbi, we had signed an agreement that when we become rabbis, we would spend 2 years in wherever the Jewish community needed us. Not go where you want to go. You want to go to Washington? Not yet. You want to go to Philadelphia, Los Angeles? No. You have to go where you're needed. At that time, there was a war the United States was fighting in Vietnam, and they needed rabbis in the military. So they gave me a choice. Which branch of the service do you want to go to? I didn't want to go to the army because everybody in the army was getting killed. I saw it on television every night, body bags. Didn't want to go to the Navy because I didn't want to sleep with a lot of other men in a bunk like this. So when I was left, I went, the Marines, they're crazy, and I went to the Air Force. I was a rabbi in the Air Force. They sent me right away to Southeast Asia, and my job was every day to get on another plane and go visit the Jewish men who were stationed in about 12 bases all around Thailand and that whole area. I was the only rabbi for the whole United States Air Force in the whole Vietnam area.
Wow.
And it turned out to be a profound experience that affected me religiously. I'll share it with you. And when my combat year was over, they asked me to stay on the second year there, because then after that I could go to Washington, D.C. I stayed there for 2 years, and it was 2 very formative years of my life. But the problem was that the planes I went on was a C-130, very, 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 very loud, and I began to lose my hearing. And now I have a 70% loss, and I have 2 hearing aids, the best that they give. It's not enough. That's my introduction to you. I have to read lips.
Oh, really? So can you read mine?
So my question would be...
Yeah, no, that's good. I don't need the microphone.
You know, so you have mentioned that you entered law school. So have you graduated from law studies? Have you became lawyer, or you just switched to rabbi practice?
Very good question. And yes, I went to New York University Law School. Did I graduate? Did I become a lawyer? I have friends who became lawyers and then switched and went to rabbinical school, became rabbis. Not me. I was in New York. Why did I go to law school? Being a boy who had studied in the Orthodox world, I studied the Talmud. The Talmud is all about law and the intricacies of law and arguments, constantly back and forth, fascinating, unbelievable set of material. So that attracted me. When I went to law school, I found that I had to read big, thick books about real estate law or corporate law that didn't challenge the mind, only challenged the memory. You had to memorize. And it didn't hold my interest. And when I found a passion, I left law school. I never graduated law school. I went right to rabbinical school. And there I earned a master's in Hebrew letters and rabbinical ordination, and ultimately got a doctorate. And the subjects I was studying at university, interesting enough, were not Judaism. At university, I studied economics and philosophy. And when I went to the Hebrew University, I continued to study economics and philosophy. I don't know if you've heard of the writer Amos Oz. He really had, he was a great writer. Israel's great writer. He was actually in a class that I was in, and Yigal Yadin, who was an archaeologist from Atzada, He was a professor that I had. I went at a time that there were some great people there. But that was it for law school, and I don't regret it. So, are we ready now for the movements? Okay. There are the following movements in Judaism. I didn't even make a list to make sure I don't leave any out. There is the Hasidic movement, the Lithuanian Yeshiva movement, the modern Orthodox movement, the right-wing conservative movement, or traditionals, they call themselves, the left-wing Orthodox conservative movement, called the liberals, the Reform movement, the Reconstructionist movement, the Renewal movement, the Chavarot movement, and the Humanistic Judaism movement. That's about 10. It's a lot. They say if you have 2 Jews, you have 3 opinions. Now, here's an example. But the fact of the matter is, actually, you can divide them all into only 2 movements. Orthodox and non-Orthodox. In the Orthodox movement, you have Hasidim, who are Orthodox. They go through what they believe and how they live, but they're Orthodox. The Lithuanian Yeshiva type, Talmudic scholarship, Orthodox. The modern Orthodox are Orthodox. All of them have one thing in common that makes them different from all the rest, and all the rest, conservative, reform, reconstructionist, renewal, the Chavarot, humanistic Judaism, they're all on the other side of the fence because they also have one thing in common. What is that? Anybody have an idea? Anything guess? There's the Orthodox and the non-Orthodox. And the non-Orthodox see themselves united, and the Orthodox see themselves united, even though they have different styles. What actually differentiates Orthodox from non-Orthodox? Is there anybody here who does not know what a Torah scroll is? The Torah scroll? Don't know. The Torah scroll is a scroll of parchment with handwritten Hebrew letters that are the first 5 books of the Bible. The 5 books of the Bible that Jews have and Christians have, and in certain ways even the Muslims have it because there's a part of they're strongly influenced by early Jewish traditions. And this is called the Torah. Torah means the way, like in Zen Buddhism, the way. It could also be translated as instruction. It's most often mistranslated as the law. But the Torah refers to the first 5 books of the Bible. And those 5 books start with the story of creation, how the world was created by God, and in 6 days, and then Adam and Eve, and then there was a flood, and Noah was saved in an ark, and then came Abraham, and he was encouraged to go to another land, and then he had his children, descendants. There's Isaac. He was married to Sarah. Isaac married Rebecca. Then they had 2 sons. They were twins, but not identical. And one of them, the younger one, was Jacob, Yaakov, and he had 12 sons. They became the fathers of 12 tribes. As a family, they went to Egypt because there was a famine in the land. They came back. They were made into slaves in Egypt. And some parts say 230 years, some say 410 years. I say some, in other words, some parts of the Torah, of the Bible, give that period, that time. And then they cried, to God, they prayed, God decided to take them out, and he appointed this man named Moshe, or Moses, my Hebrew name, but he wasn't named after me, I'm named after him. And he came and he confronted the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh wouldn't let them go, and with God's help he brought 10 plagues, and the last plague, they let them out, and they spent 40 years traveling through the wilderness, through the desert, until they reached the end of the promised land, where Moses died, before going in with them.
Yeah.
And that's where the Torah ends. And in those 40 years, God kept appearing to Moses, giving him laws. The laws of kosher food, the laws of the Shabbat, the laws of love your neighbors yourself, love the stranger as yourself, return a lost object, don't put a stumbling block before a blind person, help the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, all these laws, and then Moses dies. That's the Torah. Is anybody familiar with it already? Yeah, okay. The Orthodox believe that we got the Torah from scribes and sages before us, who got it from scribes and sages before them, who got it from scribes and sages before them, who got them from great rabbis, who got it from great leaders, who got it from prophets, who got it from Joshua, who got it from Moses, who got it from God. Whether they are Hasidic, or yeshiva type, or modern Orthodox who go to movies, if they're Orthodox, the core belief is that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, were dictated by God. God made all of those laws and all of that history. And therefore, what's the result? If God is the author of those 5 books of the Torah, what does that mean?
It's a law.
It's a law for all time.
Yes.
It can never be changed.
Of course.
It's God's law. So you may not agree with the law, but that's the law because God gave it. And the law doesn't seem to, the Torah doesn't cover every law and every practice and every holiday, etc. But over the ages, rabbis and sages, particularly in the Talmudic period, interpreted the law to apply to all situations. So that whether you can drive a car on Shabbat, or strike a match, or turn on a light, or whether you can eat food on a paper plate, or you have to have it, all those laws are interpretations of the Torah. And who gave that interpretation? Not a rabbi from the 2nd century, God. And the image is that while the Israelites had left, after they left Egypt, they camped around a mountain called Sinai. As it says in the Torah, Moses climbed up to the mountain, was there for 40 days and 40 nights, and God dictated these 5 books to him, and God also taught him the interpretations, so that based on those interpretations, we know whether or not you're permitted to drive a car on Shabbat in the year 1950, or whether you can use an iPhone on Shabbat, or on Rosh Hashanah in 2010, or whether you could, tweet somebody on Yom Kippur. All based on the rules from that time. Who's the author of it all? God. How old is the world? 5,777 years. How do we know? That's the calculation from the time we can go back and count who has lived how long to the story that the world was created in 6 days. Period. Not 6 million years or 6 billion years or 100,000 years. The world was created in 6 days, exactly the way the Bible says so. Now, you can try to interpret it, maybe it means 6 periods, etc., but clearly the Bible is stating this is how the world came into being. And when the Bible tells the story of God making a man, a male man, to watch over this Garden of Eden, and the man was lonely, and so God put him to sleep, took a rib, from the rib he made a woman. That's what happened. That's what the Orthodox belief is. If you find somebody with payas and a beard and a black hat, or a woman with a wig and 7 and 12 kids, and you say to her, how were women created? They would tell you, from Adam came Eve from the rib of man. How old is the world? 5,777 years, as of last Rosh Hashanah. Can a woman become a rabbi? No. Why? It doesn't say in the Torah anywhere that a woman can't be a rabbi. But that is the interpretation that we were taught, that Moses learned from God and passed it down to all generations. And therefore, a woman can never be a rabbi. A woman can never be counted in the quorum of men, in a quorum for service. Nothing can be changed. And that's why an Orthodox Jew lives a life that functions in the modern world. You can drive a car, there's no prohibition against driving a car. You can take the tram or the subway or a bus, no prohibition. You can fly in a plane, no prohibition. But on that plane, you have to request specifically kosher food, and you cannot change. You are on that plane, if you are very right-wing Orthodox, you don't want to sit next to a woman. If you're a man, or if you're a man, if you're a woman, you don't want to sit next to a man, because although the Torah doesn't say it anywhere, the interpretation of that rule comes from God. It's unchangeable. Is that clear?
Sure. Yeah.
Any questions about that? I will tell you that if in the modern Orthodox world, they would look for ways to reconcile that with what scientists are teaching us, and we learn from critical thinking. But there's very strict limits.